Hey, it's my boys. Morning, everyone. Boy, you feel so far away. Welcome to First Unitarian Church in New Bedford. I am Karen LeBlanc, and I minister to this congregation as we minister to each other here. We are a beloved community of people who believe that everyone is worthy of respect. Science is real. The democratic process is a sacred thing, that we are all part of an interconnected web, and the light and energy we put out makes a difference in this world. We are people of purpose here, and if what you hear today resonates with you, we hope you will consider becoming part of this way cool family of seekers and keepers of this very long dream that is our church. And if you're new, fill out one of these cool blue cards. That'll put you on our mailing list. Because there's lots of stuff going on here at our church. Couple quick housekeeping points. Please keep your masks on in service. Maintain your social distance. There are hand sanitizing stations at the front and the back. Singing is fine as long as you keep that mask on. Coffee hour is still canceled, I'm afraid. Candles of joy and concern today we will not be doing because I've got a long service. And that's about it. If you would put your phones into worship mode so that we can have quiet and make this place into a sacred space, that'll be great. I will now light our chalice. Okay, the words for the chalice lighting. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. Opening words are also from Reverend King. This was delivered in Detroit, Michigan, February 28th, 1954. The trouble isn't so much that we don't know enough, but it's as if we aren't good enough. The trouble isn't so much that our scientific genius lags behind, but our moral genius lags behind. The great problem facing modern man is that the means by which we live have outdistanced the spiritual ends for which we live. So we find ourselves caught up in a messed up world. The problem is with man himself and man's soul. We haven't learned how to be just and honest and kind and true and loving. And that is the basis of our problem. The real problem is that through our scientific genius, we've made of the world a neighborhood. But through our moral and spiritual genius, we've failed to make of it a brotherhood. Good morning. We don't need your help today for the tech. It's because Randy is not going to be, he's all set. But I appreciate you being here. This is Brody, our miniature tech guy. Please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able, and sing with me hymn number 108, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. These are Quaker words, but they are set to an American gospel tune. Number 108.
A new
one another, if you would. Good morning, Patanatis. And we will read together while you're standing here our covenant, which is printed in your order of service. We come together as a religious community, upholding freedom of conscience, right relationship, and the inherent worth of all people. We value our diversity and pledge to care for one another in the spirit of compassion, to speak and listen to each other with respect, and to promote justice and kindness in the world. And, some centering music from Randy. Please be seated. It's a powerful piece. Randy has been doing a slate of all black composers today, I believe. Black female composers, even better. Our first reading this morning is from Reverend Dr. King. I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day, we must come to see that the whole Jericho Road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. Our meditation today is this great poem by Amanda Gorman that was read at our president's inauguration. And I don't know if you know this, but Amanda Gorman almost refused doing this. It was scary. She didn't know how people were going to react because she's black, and she finished writing it after January 6th, and there was a lot to say, and she just wasn't sure, but she found the courage, and she did. So this is her poem, The Hill We Climb. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reading for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew. Even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll be forever tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade, the hill to climb if we only dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain, if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy in change, our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept north, east where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rinsed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step outside the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if we are only brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Selections really have a lot of emotion in them, huh? Amazing. Our second reading is from Dr. King, excerpted from his speech to the Montgomery Improvement Association at the Holt Street Baptist Church in December 1955. As you know, my friends, there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. There comes a time, my friends, when people get tired of being plunged across the abyss of humiliation, where they experience the bleakness of nagging despair. There comes a time when people get tired of being pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July and left standing amid the piercing chill of an alpine November. There comes a time. We are here. We are here this evening because we're tired now. I want to say that we are not here advocating violence. No, we have never done that. I want it to be known throughout Montgomery and throughout this nation that we are Christian people. We believe in the Christian religion. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is the weapon of protest. That's all. And certainly, this is the glory of America with all its faults. This is the glory of our democracy. If we were incarcerated behind the iron curtains of a communistic nation, we couldn't do this. If we were dropped in the dungeon of a totalitarian regime, we couldn't do this. But the great glory of American democracy is the right to protest for right. My friends, don't let anybody make us feel that we are to be compared in our actions with the Ku Klux Klan or the White Citizens Council. There will be no crosses burned at bus stops in Montgomery. There will be no white persons pulled out of their homes and taken out on some distant road and lynched for not cooperating. There will be nobody among us who will stand up and defy the Constitution of this nation. We only assemble here because of our desire to see right exist. My friends, I want it to be known that we are going to work with grim and bold determination to gain justice. Now, sing with me, rise in body and spirit if you are willing and able. Number 149, 149. Stony and cold road we trod. hearts, drunk with the wine of the world we forget. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land. Please be seated. As you know, they call that the Black National Anthem. Now is the time in our service where we ask you for your kind donations toward the good works of this church. Our board president, Steve, and our treasurer, Deb, will be coming around. So treat them well. They're good people. Just a note, too, for kids, Brody is of an age to probably hear this sermon. The younger kids might not be. They might be, but they might not be. Okay. My friends, I am dog tired. You ever get to the point when you want to raise your fist to the sky and scream, "Enough!" And you put so much raw power into it, into the rejection of something that you think for just a second, that something must have changed. You look around and everything seems the same. But then you take a few steps and you realize, oh no, something has changed. Me, inside me. I had that experience researching and thinking about this sermon very deeply about the systemic racial injustice and oppression in our country. Every little news item jumped out at me. I read dozens and dozens of articles and a few scholarly papers until my brain was bulging with information and my heart was about to explode and my soul felt so heavy with the grief of it all, the unfairness, the injustice, and the shame. And I sat down and looked at my notes and just wept for a while as it all crashed over me. I cried a river that night, Friday, when I started this, that started in 1619 and landed me in the chaos that is our current state of affairs in this country. And then I was all out of tears and sadness, and there was something inside me to replace it. There was anger, certainly. Deep frustration, definitely. And there was the stubborn determination that apparently is the hallmark of a Karen. And I want to see somebody's manager right now. If I have the power, and y'all have given me the power apparently, I didn't ask for it. If I have the power, I will use it for truth and justice for all. I might say things that you don't like, but by co-opting a perfectly good name and turning it into something awful, you have created this monster. Now there's no turning back. So welcome to Critical Race Theory 101, where we step back and look at racism and how it has had a distinct and measurable effect on our culture and country systemically. I think critical race theory is a bad term. I think we should call it BPR, big picture racism, because that's a much easier way to explain it to people and to understand it. When you take that word critical out, you know? Before I start talking history, let's start in the present with one particular Florida man, Governor Ron DeSantis. Amen. Who just passed a law against teaching lessons in school that might be making any students, quote, feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin. This is how bold racists have become. Those they call liberal snowflakes want to ensure that their kids don't feel uncomfortable that they are white and that this country was built on the shredded and busted backs of our black slaves. But of course, this is just the same old tune, just new lyrics. The tune goes like this: la 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 la, black people make strides and get a little freedom, maybe a little equality, do 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 do. Let's squash them and beat them and kill them and torture them for it. It's a short song, but it's easy to learn, so everyone remembers it. We're going to skip right over the fact that all of these founding fathers that we love were slave owners. Not all of them, but most of them. We know that. We're going to skip to after the Civil War, during the decade known as Radical Reconstruction, 1867 to 77. Congress granted African American men the status and rights of citizenship, including the right to vote, as guaranteed by the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Beginning in 1867, branches of the Union League, which encouraged the political activism of African Americans, spread throughout the South. In all, 16 African Americans served in the U.S. Congress during Reconstruction. More than 600 were elected to state legislatures, and hundreds more held local offices all across the South. In all, 16 African Americans, I repeated a sentence here by mistake. Hiram Revels. He was the first African American elected to the U.S. Senate in 1861. taking the Senate seat from Mississippi that had been vacated by none other than Jefferson Davis. Doesn't that feel good? As you can imagine, this made white Southerners very unhappy. These were men they would have beaten and called boy just a few years ago. What right did they have to get so much so fast? Well, thanks to organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, black leaders and their families were continually targeted, threatened, and harassed. 56 black leaders in the South were murdered during Reconstruction. Some black men continued to hold office until around the turn of the century, but then it pretty much ended. In 1967, a century after Hiram Revels served in the Senate, Edward Brooks of Massachusetts became the first African-American senator elected by popular vote. Jim Crow segregation laws flourished for that century. I can imagine this might have been the source of much deep anguish for our black brothers and sisters. The Civil rights movement began in the South in the 1950s to protest widespread segregation, discrimination, disenfranchisement, and racially motivated violence that permeated all personal and structural aspects of life for black people. In 1954, you had the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education decision, where the Supreme Court ruled that schools could no longer be segregated and that the state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students was unconstitutional. In many places, that took decades and decades to enforce. September 3rd, 1957, 9 young black students were slated to go to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. First day of school, the vitriol and hatred from their fellow students was palpable. And when they got there, they were greeted by the National Guard, not to protect them, but to disallow them entry. On September 23rd, they again bravely tried to go get their equal opportunity to learn. And now let me take a moment to tell you, they could only go there to learn. They were not to be involved in any sports, any clubs, anything like that. No, no, no. So on September 23rd, they went back. And this time they did get inside the building. But outside, there was such a huge riot that they had to be removed by Little Rock police for their own safety. On September 24th, President Dwight D. Eisenhower ordered units of the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division, Screaming Eagles, into Little Rock, federalized the Arizona National Guard. In a televised speech delivered to the nation, President Eisenhower said, "Mob rule cannot be allowed to override the decisions of the courts." On September 25th, under federal troop escort, the Little Rock Nine made it inside for their first full day of school. The 101st Airborne stayed until the end of October, and the federalized Arkansas National Guard troops had to remain there throughout the year. Each student had to be assigned a guard to walk with them to class every day due to the ongoing verbal and physical attacks from the other students. And God forbid you were a white kid that tried to get along with these black children, because you would be treated to the same nasty vitriol. Meanwhile, there were other issues of desegregation, like blacks not being able to sit at the front of the bus, or if a white person come on and wanted your seat, they say, "Get up, I need to sit there." This led to the famous boy boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. Blacks were also not allowed to sit at the counter of a Woolworths, and that led to many sit-ins in Greensboro, South Carolina, and other places. Peaceful protests like those eked out tiny victories here and there. Determined to desegregate Birmingham, Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference had staged a series of business boycotts in April 1963 that resulted in numerous arrests. On May 2nd, King launched the final and most controversial phase of what they called Project C, the C standing for confrontation. Though these protests were overwhelmingly peaceful, despite the term, King sent in children ranging from 6 to 18, marching through the streets for freedom, peacefully. But there was a rampant and unapologetic racist known as Eugene Bull Connor in charge, and by nightfall, his cops had jailed 959 of those children. For 10 days, blacks marched peacefully in the streets of Birmingham, only to have fire hoses turned on them with blasts so hard it would literally rip the clothing from black bodies, only to be bitten by dogs and beaten by police for wanting equal treatment as human beings. And all of this happened on national television, making us see our country's racism close up. Nobody had never really seen it like that before. Birmingham's business leaders quickly realized that this was a public relations disaster. It was going to cut into their bottom line. So over the next few days, as Connor's cops continued to crack down on the skulls of demonstrators, they quietly capitulated and negotiated a settlement which was stunning for its time. They agreed to desegregate lunch counters and fitting rooms. They agreed to remove whites-only signs from drinking fountains and restrooms. They agreed to hire more African Americans. King declared it a moment of great victory. But in Birmingham's bitter mayor, Art Haynes, he denounced the businessmen as gutless traitors. And Connor was apoplectic. He said, "I would have beaten King if those damn merchants hadn't given in." The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964 and prohibited the discrimination in public places, provided for the integration of schools and other public facilities, and made employment discrimination illegal based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The Voting Rights Act followed in 1965 to protect the rights of black voters and make elections fair in the heavily gerrymandered South. Part of that was overturned by our Supreme Court, of course, in 2013 with John Roberts declaring that so much had changed. Remember, so much had changed in 50 years. And that law was based on, decades-old data and eradicated practices. Yeah. Before you could say, slap me in the face, those same states we're on a nostalgic mission to make it as hard as possible again for people of color to vote. We're watching it play out right now, with some Republican governors using the non-existent threat of voter fraud to cut voting hours, especially on Sundays, and polling locations in black districts to implement ID laws. They want to stop mail-in voting or convenient drop boxes, and some have even made it illegal to give food and water to people who stand in line for hours to exercise their right to vote. That is inhumane. The whole civil rights movement seems like an awful lot of psychological distress for people of color to endure and to carry still. But we don't want white people to have to feel bad or guilty about it. So welcome to Florida. Let's not have any mention of black history here. On May 25th, 2020, a 46-year-old black man by the name of George Floyd was arrested for passing a suspected counterfeit $20 bill and was murdered in the city of Minneapolis by a white police officer named Derek Chauvin. 3 officers stood by and watched, preventing interference from the crowd, while an already subdued and cuffed Mr. Floyd had Mr. Chauvin's knee pressed on his neck for nearly 9 minutes until he asphyxiated and died. Early on May 26th, the Minneapolis Police Department issued a statement which said absolutely nothing about Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck. It said, after Floyd got out of his car, he physically resisted officers. Officers were able to get the suspect into handcuffs and noted he appeared to be suffering medical distress. Well, my gosh, you put put a knee on someone's neck, they might suffer a little distress. Fortunately, this scene was recorded by multiple people, some of whom were heard yelling in the background, "You're killing him! You're killing him!" This video was seen all over the world, and if you weren't absolutely appalled watching it unfold, I'm sorry, you're a certified sociopath. After what everyone could see was a reckless disregard for that man's life, the Black Lives Matter movement really took off. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean other lives don't, but that we obviously have to be reminded all the time that black lives are not disposable lives. There were protests against the very apparent systemic racism in our country. Again, largely peaceful, but there were some riots and looting and destruction of property. The police dealt with those protesters harshly. But there was a feeling in the air, a feeling like things were sort of changing for the black community, that they were really coming together to speak with one powerful voice and say, enough! We have endured too much, and now we have all seen how blacks are treated differently, so something has to change. And change it did, but not like you'd think. The racist right wing in our country, who has so long bristled against political correctness, like using the N-word, had a president in office who felt it was long past time to get rid of such woke nonsense. We watched young white men in Charlottesville, North Carolina, carry torches through the streets, shouting old hits like "Jews will not replace us" and "Blood and Soil," meaning that this is their country, a white country, and there's no place for ideas like equity. One man drove his car through counter-protesters, killing a young woman, Heather Heyer. Since then, hate crimes against minorities have increased by leaps and bounds. In one state, they even tried to make it legal to run down protesters with a car if they might have feared for their lives inside the car. I have lost track, my friends, of all the names of the black men and women killed indiscriminately since then and before then. Breonna Taylor, killed by police in her own home after a no-knock warrant. Ahmaud Arbery, chased down and hunted like a beast for jogging while black. Thankfully, those men are in jail for life now. But again, had there not been a video of what actually happened that day, they would absolutely be free, claiming self-defense. Just a couple of weeks ago, another black man who was a FedEx driver was chased and shot at by white men in trucks because he wouldn't stop and explain to them what he was doing in their neighborhood. Imagine being the parent of a black child and having to have the talk with them before they go to kindergarten. Now, sweetie, there's a lot of people in this world who will be very unkind to you and treat you differently because you're black. You just keep your head down and try not to make them angry. Because let's face it, since the Civil War, there's been a whole lot of angry white people who have not been happy with all this equality nonsense. And blacks have had to just learn to live with it, to live with white rage and entitlement. That sounds rather uncomfortable for black folk, doesn't it? Rather uncomfortable indeed. But no, let's make a law that says talking about all this nasty history and current event stuff might make white people feel uncomfortable or feel guilty, and that's just so unfair to them. It takes away their freedom, takes away their right not to have to feel guilty about injustice. It appalls me. Let me close by saying that I, and I know everyone in this room, have had enough of this entitled gibberish and recognize that parents railing against CRT at school board meetings breaches the absurd. Really. Our history is what it is, and if we don't accept it, mark it as dark and awful, learn from it and change, we will continue to sing that same old tune again and again. The bad Karens will win. So to end on a positive note, I see so much hope in our young people who have grown up in a different world, a smaller world where they can see each other and talk to each other and support each other. Like Obi-Wan, they are our only hope. Our only hope for long-lasting change. Our only hope for actual liberty and justice for all. May those young people be braver and smarter than us. May they take a steamroller to that long arc of justice and flatten it like a pancake until it reaches right here in the present, because our brothers and sisters of color can't wait any longer. They waited long enough. Good Karen out. Of course you can ask a question, Rochelle.
So from now until the end of the year, I'm teaching my students about Black artists. And when I talk about issues with my students, it makes the children of color uncomfortable. It doesn't necessarily make the children, the white children, uncomfortable, which makes me feel uncomfortable. And I get
Right, right.
anxious, like I'm shaking because I look at their little faces and I kind of burst into tears.
Yeah. I hear you, Rochelle. Well, it's...
We haven't been taught as educators how to teach children of color or be sensitive of cultural differences or so I'm just like treading water and one of my little kids raises his hand and says, I wish the 1900s never happened, I'm like, and teaching children about oppression in second grade, which I did Friday, and what does oppression mean and how it's still happening today, makes me like I feel like crying now, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not, but
Rochelle, I know the kind of heart you have.
it's really scary.
I bet it is.
And I don't want to hurt the children, but like I tell them, not that long ago when Mrs. P was a little girl, if I have white skin, and I would only be able to teach children of And they look at me like, what? And
Yeah, the idea is crazy to them.
and they're like, that's the stupidest thing. That sucks. And like I taught them about Clementine Hunter, and her artwork was in a museum, and she was not allowed to see her artwork in the museum.
Yeah.
Her artwork was hanging in. And they're like, oh, that's so stupid. And like, try to teach them about like, okay, that happened in 1940 or 1950, but okay, really nothing has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I feel like I'm on such thin ice. Like, I don't want to scare the kids, but I want them all to be aware. And
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what to say. I have no idea what to do half the time.
I think, Rochelle, part of our problem is that we don't ask black people, black children, how they feel, how they think
Right,
these things should be taught, and we also don't want to single people out.
right.
Like if you, if you went to a new school and you were in a wheelchair for some reason,
Yeah.
the last thing you want is to be like, there's a new person here that's handicapped, so make sure, you want to just feel like any other student, right? And that's hard to do.
But then I had a student on Monday.
Let's finish this up because we're recording. So yes, that's okay. But no, you make a great point, and my heart goes out to teachers who are struggling with this. It's tough. All right, let us rise now. Body or spirit as you are able, and sing with me, number 169, We Shall Overcome, Let Us Try. We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, dear, 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 closing words are from Desmond Tutu. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Amen, good people. Hold fast. We love you. Stay strong. We will see you next week for an awesome musical service. And now let us just process for a moment and listen to a last little piece of music.